So I will crack on as we have a busy morning ahead of us. Hello everyone. My name is Ruth Hall. On the Co-operative Party National Executive Committee via Scotland, and I'm the Vice Chair of the NEC. Welcome back to the second day of Ambition for Change, this year's Co-op Party conference. I hope you enjoyed the interesting and informative sessions we had yesterday. I believe there was over 1,000 people joined us yesterday, which is fantastic to see. And a chance to speak to cooperators using a slightly different format than before yesterday. We'd really like to hear your thoughts on how you thought it went yesterday. So do email us your feedback at mal@party.coop, so we can look at how we can keep this going in the future. So today's sessions focus on the business conference and is being held on Zoom for greater interaction with members, kind of reflecting that the Sundays of kind of in-person conferences that we traditionally kind of have. And I've even got the conference lurgy to go with it, so apologies for any coughing that might happen. So there'll be plenty of discussion and debate on our policy. And as with all Co-op Party Zoom events, there are a number of things I need to highlight before we start. So today's conference is live captioned. You can enable this by pressing the CC button at the bottom of your screen. We are recording today's conference and we will make it available on our YouTube channel to those who cannot join us live. If you don't want your image to be seen on this recording, please go to audio only, but it is nice to be able to see everyone's faces today. You have been muted and only those speaking will have their sound enabled. If you want to make a contribution, please put it in the chat or raise your virtual hand and we will send you a message asking you to unmute when the time arrives. And before we start, the Co-operative Party believes that our cooperative values should be reflected in our actions as well as our policies. We want all members and all our event participants to feel safe, welcome and respected in our party. Please ensure you abide by this when making your contributions today, and I do look forward to hearing from them. So we received no emergency motions to conference before the 5 PM deadline yesterday, so we're going to jump straight into the busy agenda for today. Please refer to the online programme timings for details of all the sessions. So I want to take this time at the start to thank our many co-operators across the country for their work to promote and uphold our cooperative values and politics. At the Co-operative Party, we really do appreciate all that you, our members and supporters do. One of the ways we do this is by presenting our members who've gone over and abroad with an achievement award. And this year I am delighted this will be presented to Ian Adderley in recognition of his tireless work to transform the London Co-operative Party during his time as chair over the past decade. Respected across the party for his expert chairing, he has persistently demonstrated his dedication to ensuring cooperative values and principles are embedded in local campaigns and policy. He is a committed co-operator with extraordinary knowledge of the cooperative movement, including his involvement with the UK Society of Cooperative Studies, which I think is where I met him for the first time. The London Party, with Ian as chair, saw him empower delegates to exercise the Co-op Party's role in selection processes for parliamentary, GLA and local government office and publish our first London-wide manifesto for many years. His leadership of the party resulted in the London Co-operative Party working more closely with our colleagues in the local Labour Party. Ian pioneered the concept of implementing a 3-year strategy to guide our activity, enabling the London Party to work more systematically and strategically when lobbying for greater influence of cooperative ideas and adoption of our policies. We are grateful for the many hours and years that Ian has put into the London Party and think it's about time that his commitment was recognised at annual conference. So thank you so much, Ian, for everything you have done, and the award is in the post to you. We'll have a drink for you next year when we're in person. So now we are going to move on to the first of our 2 sessions this morning that are looking at cooperative campaigning. So this first one is cooperative campaigning for social justice, which I'm pleased to be chairing. And today we'll be hearing from Niall from your local Pantry, Emma Back, Equal Care Co-operative, and Paul Gerrard from the Co-operative Group. So promoting social justice is integral to the Co-operative Party's principles and policies. During this cost of living crisis, many people are struggling to make ends meet, often having difficulty putting food on the table. So this session will hear from organisations promoting social justice and that are responding to challenges in different fields to try to improve people's lives. We will hear about the work to tackle food insecurity, which the Co-op Party has campaigned on in our Right to Food campaign. We will learn about new cooperative solutions to social care, which puts service users and care recipients in control, making a change from the broken system which has let care recipients down for too long. And we will hear from the Co-operative Group on their efforts to promote social mobility amongst some of the most disadvantaged communities across the UK. So we will allow each of our speakers will make a kind of a short presentation, a short talk, and then we'll have some time for Q&A and chat afterwards. So if you do have questions for any of the panelists today, please raise your hand or pop it in the chat. I was going to start with Niall, but he hasn't turned up just yet. So if we're all right, we'll go to you. Oh, he's just walked into the waiting room. But if it's all right, Emma, if we go with you first, just to give Niall a chance to kind of get in and get settled, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Ruth. And it is an absolute pleasure to be here with you all today. I am Emma Back from Equal Care Co-op. We started in 2018 as a platform co-op. So we're building a digital platform that is owned by our members. We work to an alternative model of delivering social care. So we build teams that are led by the person who is getting that care and support to make sure that that decision making remains at the absolute kind of source of that care. And we really focus very heavily on the relationship that exists between the person who is doing the giving and the person who is doing the receiving, because without that, there is no point to the system. The structure that we use is around kind of decision making is around consent. So we have kind of groups, local groups of mostly workers who are making decisions around who to recruit into their area, which new teams to start, so which new people to support, and looking at kind of the things that are usually the province of kind of managers or owners of the business, so kind of revenue various numbers around how well a particular area is doing. We also have a campaigning element. So last year we published a report called Buying Our Care, which resulted in a scrutiny committee at our local council looking at how Muslim members of the community were getting access to social care or not, and kind of discriminatory elements that were taking place there. It was a piece of work that we sort of helped to catalyse, but was absolutely spearheaded by our local community, and resulted in kind of change and a lot of attention on our local council's part. So we're looking at doing kind of a similar thing this year in the realm of care and support workers, and seeing that through a gendered lens. I don't know how much I need to, but workers, so the social care system is a wicked problem. It is something that successive governments have attempted to look at and solve. It's resulted in a string of green papers, white papers, and policy attempts to change it. It is a huge and multi-layered, very complex problem. Worker exploitation is rife. So across the sector, in terms of workers' pay, whether you're paid when you walk into someone's house and you stop being paid when you walk out of it. Also, the extent of autonomy that you have in your role as a care worker is incredibly limited. Your day is regimented from beginning to end, and that that is a sort of an infantilizing way, really, of engaging with people who are there to support others and who you're wanting to use their autonomy, use their natural creativity, use their compassion to be able to support people. But they cannot do it. It is impossible to do it when you're surrounded by a structure that is monitoring you, that is surveilling you, and that is telling you where to be at every single minute of every day. There are huge structural issues as well in terms of the financialization of social care. I think it is absolutely wrong that any social care, health and social care organisation should be listed on the London Stock Exchange, on the Dow Jones, let alone the London Stock Exchange, and also owned by hedge funds as well. So where they are seen merely as profit-making vehicles there to provide returns, with absolutely no regard for social ones. Obviously, this has a huge knock-on impact for people receiving care and their families. So not knowing who's going to turn up, knowing that the worker who is supporting you is in a fundamentally exploitative relationship with their employer, and also not knowing when they're going to show up or for how long. So yeah, it's a tricky picture. Definitely ripe for a bit of social justice. So how can Labour and co-op councillors support local social care co-ops? Certainly through grant funding programmes. We've seen a few councils, not our own, unfortunately, but a few councils across the country have run grant funding, specifically aimed at cooperatives, seed investment programmes, and particularly in terms of the lever that is available to councils, making use of the light touch procurement regime to fund and support pilot programmes for cooperatives to get started. There is a huge governance overhead for co-ops that isn't there for normal companies, and they do take longer because there is more inclusion, there is more talking, there is more community engagement, there is more of that initial work that you need to do before you start becoming before you start moving into a surplus. The other aspect is advice and mentoring, making that available. Ideally with a partnership with Co-ops UK, who have helped us a lot over the years. Looking at the national picture, this is on my wish list. So a targeted funding package to jumpstart the sector, as in the cooperative social care sector, because it is tiny. I think we are one of 4 social care co-ops in the country, which is ridiculous, and a very open commitment, probably through the alternative business strategy, but to move away from models of ownership that put profit before people, when we're looking at procurement for services that should be local, that should be predominantly geared towards social impact, and shouldn't be being pushed away into these profit incentives. Then the second really big one is around the law and the regulatory framework for which really impacts on cooperative investment. Now this goes for social care co-ops, but actually is a problem across the sector, and for the group as well as little things like us. The phrase, I think, is debilitating ambiguity and over restriction on the part of the FCA, which steps into the vacuum that's been left by the 2014 Act around what does cooperative investment actually look like. So we're working on alternative investment models ourselves, but that would be a really helpful thing for the hopefully incoming government in 2024 to be looking at, because that more than anything will result in some explosive growth on the part of the cooperative sector.
Yeah, fab. Thank you for that, Emma, and really kind of setting that scene of what can be done out there in social care with cooperatives. Niall Cooper, are you there? You joined us?
Oh, I'm here.
Fab. Are you good to go?
I'm very good, yes.
Fab. Thank you. I'll hand over to you for your bit.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you all this morning. So I'm the Chief Executive of Church Action on Poverty, and we are working with the Co-op group to develop and expand a network of local food pantries, your local pantry. We've got 100 pantries in the network so far across the UK, and our aim over the next 2 years is to double that to 200 pantries. I'll say a bit more about pantries in a minute, but I want to start by going back to a report that we published with Oxfam 10 years ago called Walking the Breadline. The very first line of that report was that the growth in food poverty and hunger is a national disgrace. And I still hold by that line. The existence of food poverty and hunger in the 5th, 6th wealthiest country on the planet is a national disgrace. There is not a shortage of food in this country. You go into any supermarket, the shelves are stacked full of food. And yet, there are something like 8 million people now experiencing some form of food insecurity. Food insecurity, an inability to know where their next meal is coming from, in some cases to actually go without food. And this is not a problem of a lack of food. This is a lack of justice, and a lack of, and fundamentally it's an issue of poverty. What we said 10 years ago, and we still hold by that, is that food banks are not the long-term solution. Emergency food aid, if you talk about international development, emergency food aid, handing out food is something you do in a one-off crisis. It's not something you do on a long-term basis, and certainly not in the 6th wealthiest country. And interestingly, Trust will Trust, the biggest network of food banks, their goal now, they've had a big change, is to end the need for food banks. They don't see, even though they run 1,000 food banks, they don't think that's the long-term solution to food poverty and hunger. So the right to food is absolutely something we would subscribe to, and it's great that the co-op parties signed up to that. For us, the key thing about the right to food is it's about the right to access to food in socially acceptable ways. And I think that brings me on to two main points I really want to make. The first is that this is fundamentally an issue of income. And the welfare state was originally one of the 5 founding principles of the welfare state was to tackle the evil of want. And what's really important is that the welfare state is returned to one of that original purpose. Sadly, it's over the past 10 or 20 years has moved away from that goal. It's much more now about cutting costs, about forcing people into work, about creating social control over people. And the experience many people on low incomes have of the welfare state, particularly the Department for Work and Pensions, is that it's a hostile environment. It's not something that is a reliable place when you're in a crisis. It's not a department which has at its core goal ending destitution or tackling poverty. I looked a few years ago at what the core goals of the Department for Work and Pensions is, and I was quite shocked. Tackling poverty is not one of the core goals currently of the Department for Work and Pensions. So I think at a national level, if we're talking about policy change, then Department for Work and Pensions, and indeed government as a whole, should have a core underlying principle. Its purpose is to end destitution and to tackle poverty. And that would then lead to significant changes to how Department for Work and Pensions delivers what it does. It wouldn't use sanctions, which simply force people further into poverty and destitution. It wouldn't have ever come up with the 5-week wait, which again forces people into destitution, waiting for their first universal credit payment. And it would then look at how to help people through crisis. So when people have a crisis, that there's cash available. And there's a whole move within the anti-poverty sector and indeed the food poverty sector to a cash-first approach, that when somebody's got a crisis, the cooker breaks, there's something that means you haven't got any money for a few days, that the first point of call is to be able to access cash and not have to rely on emergency food handouts. That's something that can be delivered now locally. Some local councils are much better than others at using the hardship fund to make cash payments available. But obviously some of that is reliant again on central government funding of the emergency payments scheme, which operates much better, I have to say, in Scotland, where there is a national funded cash grant scheme. So I would advocate a cash first approach and to look at where that's already being delivered and how that could be rolled out across the country by local government. So cash first, also looking at the issue about not just the delivery of the welfare system, but that work needs to pay reliably. So that not just national minimum wage, but that the hours are reliable. And it's interesting, the Living Wage Foundation is now looking more at that, how to incentivise employers to give a reliable income, reliable hours, and move away from the insecurity that low paid work creates. But moving on to what we're doing with your local pantry. And I think it's not just us, but I think there's a broader movement to move away from emergency food charity, handouts, and restricted access to these kind of provisions through having to go to referrals, which is not a very dignified solution. So for us, it's really imperative to develop sustainable access to good food in community settings, which is dignified and gives people choice and hope, and is something which people want to be part of. We went with the local pantry model because we spent a whole year looking at the different approaches that can be taken. It's a membership-based system. It's membership clubs. People pay a weekly fee, so they have a stake. Many of the volunteers that run local pantries are also members. So it's not formally a co-op, but it's very close to many of the cooperative principles. And I think that's why the co-op group are now partnering with us to expand the model. It does give people access to good food, and it's important that the focus is good food, fresh fruit and vegetables, meat, dairy, chilled frozen food, and not just packets and tins. And that's one of the things that people really value. If you're on a low income, you can't afford fresh fruit and veg. You can't afford the kind of food which gives you enjoyment, but doesn't fill you up and doesn't feel, you can't be sure that your kids are going to eat it. So access to good food is an imperative principle, but actually being a pantry member saves you £21 a week. And we know that because the co-op group looked at the costs and the savings. And in my experience, for people on low incomes, £21 a week is a massive bonus. It means the difference between being able to heat your house as well as eat. It means the difference between being able to take your kid to the cinema or buy an ice cream or have a day trip to the seaside. So we're not talking about huge amounts of money, but we are talking about giving people dignity and choice and some headroom in their household budgets to be able to do things which allow them to participate in society, to go to a cafe, some very basic things. But pantry membership is also a social experience. People go every week, they make friends, so many volunteer. That's really important in communities where there are very few spaces that people feel they have a stake and they have a positive wider contribution. Virtually every Pantry member says, and we've asked, what's the thing that makes you want to value Pantry membership? And almost universally, it's tackling food waste. Much of the food comes from fair share. So people, again, feel that they're able to make a contribution, but also the health and mental health benefits. So food in the right way can be part of building community and building a much more hopeful and encouraging movement. So we talk about this as movement building. 100 pantries, 18,000 members. It's something which, again, the co-op's involved because it's in a way going back to the roots of the co-op movement, the Rochdale pioneers. People coming together, reclaiming dignity, reclaiming hope, reclaiming control over their own lives. And for me, that's fundamental. And in many places, we're working with local government to roll out the pantry network. And again, it's something I would encourage, whether it's pantries or other ways, that we move away from food handouts to sustainable access to good food in a dignified and a community-based setting, where people feel that they have a stake and feel that this is something positive in their lives. And in a world now where we feel like we're in a kind of perma-crisis, for people to have something in their community that gives them dignity, choice, and hope is really important now.
Thank you for that, Niall. And I know I've visited quite a few pantries, and yeah, the service they're providing is a real lifeline to an awful lot of people. So thank you for that. So I'm going to hand over to our last speaker in this session, which is Paul Gerrard from the Co-operative group. I'm hoping you're there, Paul.
I am.
Ruth. I came back.
Thanks, Ruth. Thanks, Ruth. Morning, fellow co-operators. I'm Paul Gerrard. I'm Campaigns, Public Affairs and Board Secretariat Director at the Co-op Group. And one of the issues that our members asked us to campaign on at our AGM in 2021 was, and I quote, to campaign and advocate for change to tackle the inequality we see today and challenge government to address the root causes of these issues and enable social mobility throughout our society. So I want to say just a few things. First of all, about what does social mobility mean? So I think it's quite a technocratic phrase. Some of the things that the Co-op Group, and Niall's talked about the stuff that we do with My Pantry, which we're hugely proud of and makes a massive difference. And then perhaps some of the things that a hopefully future incoming Labour government might look at. I guess the first point I would make on social mobility is this, is that for as long as I can remember, and I'm 51 now, social mobility has been, and I'm going to caricature this, but bear with me, has been about taking the young person from a broken home in a rough part of town and helping them become a CFO, helping them become a King's Counsel. Very, very rapid and accelerated progress for individuals. And that's great, and that's been championed by a lot of professional services businesses, your accountants, your lawyers. And I don't think anyone would say that's a bad thing. I think that has to be a good thing. But I think if you look across our country today and you see the levels of deprivation at communities level, not at individual, at community level, the kind of things that Niall just described, that idea of individuals getting on isn't really going to cut it. There can only ever be so many barristers and KCs and CFOs. And I think there's something about the idea of social mobility that has to be more than just individuals. It has to be communities. And I think as cooperators, the whole point of cooperation is that by working together, no one gets left behind. And I think that what social mobility means is really important. And then if we look at the things that we've tried to do in the Co-op Group as part of that, I won't talk about my local pantry because Niall's done it far more eloquently than me. But if I look at what we've done on apprenticeships, we're one of the leading apprenticeships businesses in this country. At any one time, we have between 500 and 1,000 apprentices in the Co-op Group. But what we've also done is to set up a thing called the Co-op Levy Match Fund. And what the Co-op Levy Match Fund does is most businesses will pay in a levy, the apprenticeship levy, and they can't spend it. In theory, the plan is, the policy is supposed to be you pay in the money and then you draw it back as you employ apprentices. That's a great idea. It doesn't work. 80% of the funds that businesses pay, they cannot draw back because it's too restrictive. So you have a lot of unspent levy funds. But what you can do with those levy funds is you can donate it to other businesses. And what we've done in the Co-op group is set up a thing called a levy match fund, which is now, I think from memory, got about 60 other businesses on it. It's created a pot of about £24 million. It's already secured new apprenticeship starts for about 2,000 people who wouldn't have had the opportunities for apprenticeships without that fund. And it's and interestingly, and this is the social mobility point, if you look at the individuals in that, 2/3 are women, 25% are from a ethnic minority, 25% have care responsibilities. It's far more diverse than your traditional apprenticeship group. So I think that businesses need to look at apprenticeships and need to look at how they can support apprenticeships at all levels, not just, you know, levels 7 degree apprenticeships, but the levels 2 and 3, and look at those apprenticeships, because we know that they work for a business, they work for individuals, and they work for a community. I was last week in the last 2 weeks, I visited 6 or 7 of our academies. The Co-op group supports the Co-operative Academies Trust, which has over 30 academies. I was in Leeds, not last week, the week before, at our Co-op Academy Leeds, and at 2 of our primaries, and at 1 of our special needs schools. I think there's 30-something academies in the Co-operative Academies Trust, which are educating about 20,000 young people. What's interesting about all those academies is they're all in tough places. They're all in tough places. The one I went to in Leeds, Co-op Academy Leeds, serves the most deprived, the 3rd most deprived, and the 4th most deprived wards in Leeds. What's also interesting about the academies is all but 2 of them have now got good ratings from Ofsted. Schools in those kind of tough areas often don't get that kind of rating, and they have. And you know, part of that is to do with the cooperative group. A lot of it is to do with the leadership team at the Academies Trust. But it's also, if you go into any of our academies, you will see the cooperative values and principles very explicitly on walls, talked about all the kinds of things that are helping young people understand what cooperation is. And of course, in social mobility terms, education is one of the best ways to drive social mobility and help communities get on, not just individuals. And the last point I would make on what the Co-op group has done, and I'm happy to talk about other things, is I think called the Peer Action Collective. The Peer Action Collective is a partnership we have with the I Will Foundation, the Youth and Dad Endowment Fund, about £5.6 million worth. And it equips young people in tough areas to have the kinds of skills to be able to articulate what they want and what they want to try and do and what the issues they face. So rather than it being done to young people who are trying to tackle inequalities in their communities, we're supporting them to find their own solutions, because they will know what works for them best. I was also asked, what would an incoming Labour government do? If you look at the Equality Act, at the time of the Equality Act, there's 9 protected characteristics. At the time, there was a debate about a 10th, and the 10th was socio-economic class. So it is true in this country that if you're from a poorer background, you are twice as likely to end up in a working class job than if you're from a more privileged background. What does that mean? It means that where you start is where you're going to end up in general. That can't be right. It's got to be defined by who you are, what abilities you've got, what opportunities you've got, what application and what ambitions you've got. So if I was an incoming Labour government, I would seriously look at whether there should be a 10th protected characteristic around socio-economic background. So if I applied for a job, you couldn't discriminate against me because I've got a stammer and therefore I'm disabled. You can't say that, but you could say you're from a working class background, as I am. We're not going to give you that job. It is still legal to discriminate against someone on the basis of class in 2023. So if I was an incoming Labour government, if I was Annalise on with the equalities brief, I'll be really looking at whether there should be a 10th protected characteristic that would make class a protected characteristic. Why is that important? It means that businesses then have to do something about it. They have to make sure that they're not discriminating. They have to be active in doing something about it. We published some research, groundbreaking research, the biggest survey of other businesses, colleagues that's ever been done in socio-economic class terms, with Making the Leap, and I'll try and find a link and put it in the chat. You know, businesses need to do something positive and deliberate, and making socio-economic background a 10th protected characteristic would do that. So in answer to the question, Ruth, what would I do if I was Annalise? And Annalise doesn't need any advice from me, but if she did want it, I'd say look at the Equality Act, look at making class a protected characteristic, and activate in England what they've already done in Scotland and Wales, which is that local government have to look at class when they are thinking about policies. So those two things: protected characteristic and activate the responsibility of local government to consider socio-economic background in whatever policies it makes. I'll shut up now, Ruth.
Fab, thank you for that, Paul. And I could see quite a few thumbs up you were getting that suggestion there for you. So thank you for that. So yes, we will open up for a Q&A now. So I'll start with this one that came in the chat for you, Emma, from Tim Nolan. He says, can Emma give a specific example of the over-restriction from the FCA, and how does this actually manifest in day-to-day limitations?
Yes, it's also a direct message. Yes, so the FCA have got a very specific view of what constitutes a cooperative, and that view is not necessarily shared by the cooperative movement or in other countries either. So they say things like they're very restrictive around what constitutes an appropriate return on capital. And sort of generally Co-ops UK have also interpreted that as being somewhere around 2% above or around the same as base rate. And they've also said things like there's no scope for amending returns based on the success of the cooperative, and they're very strict around capital gain, i.e. there should be zero capital gain if you've invested in a cooperative, kind of despite, I guess, looking at how long you might have invested in there, and when you're expecting to kind of take your money out. There's also restrictions around what constitutes a transferable share and whether or not that is included within a perimeter of the Financial Service and Markets Act. And because there is that ambiguity, organisations like the Community Shares Unit do not advise on transferable shares, which could be a much more flexible way of raising investment if there were a map, or if there were another template for cooperatives to be able to use. There's lots of kind of little chasers in the FCA guidance where if you're not sort of reading it with a really fine tooth comb, you can get caught out by. So yeah, those are a couple of examples, but there are many more.
Thank you. So go to the hands I've got raised. So I've got Lydia Merrill. I've got your hand up first. So you should be asked to unmute.
I've got a question for Paul, really. We've been working in Greater Manchester with the Co-op academies, but also with the FE colleges. And FE colleges are under the cosh. The transition between secondary school young people who want to become part of the green workforce is just not at all easy. That transition isn't being managed. There's no proper plan for it. So we're attempting to do that, in fact, next week at Andy Burnham's Green Summit, where we're going to be taking 60 plus construction trainees, age 16 or 17, to the Green Summit to be asking awkward questions. But I'm interested in how the Co-op academies, like the ones we've already started to work with in Manchester, can support the FE college tutors, because at the moment it doesn't look as though there's a proper match between the skills that are being delivered at school, particularly in design and technology, and the skills that are being designed through T-levels and other enormous courses at the FE colleges. So it seems to me that transition, that interface between schools and FE is absolutely important. And going back to class, I've worked most of my life in adult education, started life in a construction department at Hackney College. We need to think about prioritising the status of construction in both schools and in colleges, because at the moment they're bottom of the heap and they don't get a big enough voice, but because 40% of our CO2 comes from construction, building and so on, we need a very large, well-informed, committed and highly skilled workforce to get out there like now and get on with the retrofit and get on with the new builds. So how can we do that using the the powerful force of the Co-op academies.
Thanks, Lydia. And look, even from your question, it's pretty clear you know a great deal more about this than me. So please, I will try and answer as best I can. I think there's a couple of points I would make. The transition from school to work or education to work, full stop, is really broken in our view. There is not an effective career service in this country anymore, etc. And I think that's where I think there's a couple of things that businesses can do. And we're very fortunate in the sense that we see firsthand how broken that transition is, because we see it for our young people that leave at 16 or 18, depending on when, leave either the Co-op Academy at 16, or we do have a couple of Co-op academies that go up to 18 as well. So that is broken. I think there's a couple of things. I think we've developed a number of things around trying to smooth that transition, work experience, virtual work experience, not just with the Co-op group, but with some of our suppliers, etc. So I think there's things you can do there. And I think there's things you can do through an apprenticeship route that really helps. But I think at the heart of this, we did some research with some vaults of schools which we presented in Parliament early in the summer. And there was a group of young people not from a Co-op Academy school, from a school in Northampton, from memory. And what they said was that if I wanted to go to university, then it was a really easy, well-curated they held your hand all the way through. And this one young person, young lady who wanted to be a mechanic, said she has got an apprenticeship as a mechanic, but in her words, it was completely self-guided and self-motivated. I.e., if someone says, I don't want to go to university to an academic type route, I want to go into a more vocational T-level apprenticeship, whatever, you can still do it, but the system doesn't help you. The system doesn't make it easy. And if you're 16, 17, 18 years old, that's quite difficult. So, for example, I'll give you one bonkers example, in my view. If you're a 19-year-old apprentice, you can legally be paid £5 an hour. Now, you can go to McDonald's and earn £12 an hour. You can come to the Co-op group and earn £11, 10 to 10 an hour. But it can't be right that apprenticeships legally can be paid. Now, only 20% are, but 20% are paid that. We're not making it easy for people to think about long-term skills development. We're making it difficult for them. And I don't pretend to have the answers, Lydia, but I think you've hit a really important point. And I think businesses have got to get a lot closer to articulating what they need and when they need, and that's got to fall through. So it's not much of an answer, Lydia, but I understand your point, I think.
Okay, fab, thank you. So I've got two with their hands raised. We are getting kind of close on time, so I'm going to try and take both of you. So if you can try and keep as kind of succinct as possible. So I have got Rebecca Beagle first, followed by Saxon Spencer.
Thank you. Good morning, all. I mean, it's lovely to be part of the conference and discuss the issues we all know about. In brief, my main question is, in tackling social justice, we need to get more of the general population who perhaps, I mean, increasingly less are aware of the problems of food poverty, food insecurity, poor wages on our side. There seems to be a dichotomy, and I don't know how we get this out, where generally if you see sort of charitable fundraising, majority of people are quite generous in the UK and will give money, and they'll give to food banks, they'll support causes. But on the other hand, perhaps promoted by some of the more extreme right-wing newspapers and certainly the current government, there is a feeling that welfare handouts are a bad thing. They discourage work. And so you've got this strange thing where people that are generous will give to things, i.e. they'll think food banks, I'm giving to food banks, that's helping. But they don't see on the other side, we shouldn't have food banks and we need to help more with welfare to tackle want. I just wonder from the panel how we can kind of broaden the message, obviously beyond this group and sort of colleagues in the Labour Party who know about this, into the sort of right-wing areas and quite a lot of the population who don't understand the difference between donating, you know, in the way that they choose, as opposed to helping people in a more beneficial way. Thanks.
Thank you. If we can take Saxon as well, and then we'll get the speakers to answer both those.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Yes. Can I say, I thought there were three really inspiring speakers, because I think at times these days we wonder what we're all about, but they were actually showing some really constructive ways of improving society on them. But I'd particularly like to know from Niall, does he not think that a top priority of hopefully the next Labour cooperative government should be to reform the social benefits system? I mean, I'm particularly angry at the refusal to say they'll end the 2-child limit, which seems really penalises people because they have a 3rd or 4th child. And I'd also like to ask the cooperative group, are they looking at areas where there are cooperative deserts? Because I personally would like to see us working very closely with the cooperative group, but there are areas where there are no cooperative outlets at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, if the three speakers want to come back on any of those and any final kind of points, would be great. I don't know who wants to jump in first.
Shall I go first? If that's I wouldn't be as pessimistic about public opinion. Something like 80% of the population do think more should be done to tackle poverty. It always depends how you frame the question. But if you look at the annual social attitude survey that was out just last week, there has been a very specific and noticeable shift in public attitudes to poverty, to welfare, to inequality. So I think much more of the population are with us on this than you get if you just look at the kind of toxic national debate. And I'm disappointed that Labour aren't going a lot further. I think there will be much more public support, and we're actually with a lot of other charities and faith organisations launching a campaign next month, Let's End Poverty, because we think there's a lot of public support, and it's a grassroots campaign. We want groups all across the country to be involved on that message. Let's end poverty. We can do it. We just need the public will to demonstrate the will and get much more political buy-in to that. And that to do that, absolutely, there's so many reforms that need to be made to Department for Work and Pensions. But as I said, I think that the starting point, and it sounds ridiculous to have to say it, is that the objective, the strategic goal of the Department for Work and Pensions should be to ensure that nobody goes destitute, nobody is in poverty. And if that was the strategic goal, then you wouldn't get the 2-child limit, you wouldn't get sanctions, you wouldn't get a 5-week wait. So, but it has to flow through from the very top of the department, that the department should be ensuring that everybody has access to the essentials of life, and that the department's goal is to make sure that happens. That would take a lot of time to fix a lot of what's gone wrong, deliberately gone wrong over the past couple of decades now. But for me, that's the starting point, not just individual policies. It's the department needs to be refocused on what its core purpose should be.
Fab, thank you, Niall. So Emma or Paul, which one's coming next?
Emma, you go next, Emma.
Oh, I'd rather it was Paul, actually. I'm still gathering my thoughts after a series of children incursions.
I'll just pick up on Saxon's point about co-op deserts. Couldn't agree more, Saxon. I'm also a board member at Co-ops UK as well being employed by a group. I mean, this is the second or third panel I've been on with Emma, and where you see some broken markets like social care is a great example. The solution that works best are the cooperative ones, and the stuff that Emma and colleagues do at Equal Care Co-op is genuinely an inspiring one. I'm really encouraged that I think the Labour Party look to be holding to its doubling the size of the cooperative economy. I think that's a good thing. I'm also encouraged by our new Chief Executive, Shireen Curry-Hack, has made great importance of the fact that the co-op is a co-op, and the co-op group is a co-op and should be proud of that. But also then, what does that mean for Principle 6? What does it mean for cooperation amongst cooperatives? Because I think the best way to grow the cooperative ecosystem, and so you don't have those kind of deserts that you described, is start to look at our own supply chains and where we can work with other cooperatives that will help grow. And that's why we got to the point just like the Second World War, where co-ops were so omnipresent for British society, and I think that's where we need to get to. So I'm encouraged by the Labour pledge that I hope they will retain in any future manifesto, and obviously the detail to make that happen will be important, but that's the bit that I'm going to focus on. Emma, has that given you enough time?
Thank you.
I can just pick up briefly on the point about fundraising and sort of donations. We're a co-op, not a charity. There are reasons for that I don't need to reprise for this group. I think that we can do more work around what it means to give money and the role of kind of what that means for sort of reciprocity, what you're expecting in return. Like there's a place for member benefit, for mutual benefit, for win-win solutions in co-ops that there isn't really for the charitable structure where you have beneficiaries and you have people who will deliver to those beneficiaries. I think that we need to be saying something more about how the economy works in terms of those sorts of contributions, rather than just going, can we just have your spare change? Like, no, there is in fact a way that we can sustainably invest. There are ways in which you can contribute your funds, contribute your labour, and then to be able to reap those benefits further down the line when you may need the service that that particular cooperative provides, or where you can see how it's kind of really directly benefiting your community. So yeah, I think we can be bolder on that front.
Fab, well, thank you. So that comes to the end of this session. It's been a fantastic session. So thank you so much to Niall, to Emma and to Paul. It's been great having you here this morning, and yeah, lots to think about, and it's been a great discussion. So thank you so much for giving up this time on a Sunday. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth.
So we are, so we're now going to speak about cooperative campaigning for a fairer economy. So I will be joined by, I'm hoping they're here, Mary Patel from the Fair Tax Foundation, Sheenagh Young from South Manchester Credit Union, and Denisha Kazi from Positive Money. So as we head towards the next general election, it is clear we need to build a fairer economy which works for everyone. So in this session, we'll hear from our speakers on what is needed to build a fairer, more inclusive economy where everyone pays their fair share. The Co-operative Party has been an active campaigner on fair tax, working with our partners at the Fair Tax Foundation. We'll hear from them on how they have campaigned to get councils to sign up to the Fair Tax Declaration, which now has over 100 councils signed up. The credit union movement has helped to provide inclusive finance to communities across the country through the cooperative model. The Co-operative Party knows the credit union sector can play an even greater role in fair finance, and we will hear firsthand how South Manchester Credit Union is making a difference. The Co-operative Party has been campaigning on wider financial inclusion through our Access to Cash campaign, which aims to ensure all communities have the vital access to cash in their local area. Positive Money will discuss why this is so important and how they are promoting access to cash for communities. So as before, we will hear from our speakers, and then we will have time for questions and discussions. As I say, anything that we've not been able to get to in the session, we are cataloguing everything that's in the chat, and you can always email mal@party.coop if we don't get to you in time, and we will try to get answers and get back to you. Over to our first speaker. She's here. Mary, are you here?
Good morning, Ruth. Good morning, everybody. I'm here.
Thank you.
Thanks ever so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Patel, and I manage our outreach and movement building here at the Fair Tax Foundation. And it's always such a pleasure to be invited to speak at Co-op Party events, because we can always say hand on heart that Co-op Party and the wider tax champions, you know, whether it's been the party, get years of that, you know, right through to the many cooperative businesses that proudly display the fair tax mark, too many to list here, or as Ruth has said, being a real driving force behind our network of UK fair tax councils. So just to start with, to extend a huge thank you to cooperators everywhere for your continued efforts, but you know, I hope that I can persuade you today to keep up the really great work, because there is still a lot to do, and we would appreciate your continued support. You know, calling out the bad stuff, the tax dodging, the tax evasion is really vital, and there is still a lot of it going on. We know that researchers have estimated that the UK loses around £17 billion worth of corporation tax receipts each year, when multinational businesses shift their profits over to tax havens, to low tax jurisdictions. But just as, you know, with the likes of living wage, tackling modern slavery, you know, there comes a time when we obviously have to find progressive solutions, and I know that's so much of what the Co-op Party is all about. You know, show that there's a better, more progressive way of doing business, and this in turn helps demonstrate, you know, support for policy changes that will allow, you know, the responsible businesses out there paying their fair share of tax to operate on a level playing field, and tackle the unfair competitive advantage that tax dodgers have in the marketplace. Before I kind of get on to what we really call on your help for, just to say a quick brief bit about us as the Fair Tax Foundation. So we started in 2014, and we believe the businesses paying tax responsibly should be recognised and celebrated. Our bread and butter is the fair tax mark for business, and this is an accreditation scheme that, you know, we like to think is the gold standard of responsible tax conduct. And taken together, we've now got around 250 distinct trading businesses who between them employ over 250,000 people and contribute roughly $1.5 billion annually in corporation tax. And within this, there are a whopping 50 businesses across the UK cooperative mutual sector that hold the fair tax mark. And we're part of the Co-op movement too, registered as a community benefit society. Like I said, we've still got a really long way to go to tackle the problem of corporate tax dodging. If we look at the problem worldwide, close to 40% of multinational profits, that's some 970 billion US dollars, are still being artificially shifted over to tax havens each year, and that leads to a reduction of around 250 billion US dollars of corporation income tax revenue. You know, so, and corporation tax still continues to be a really important source of revenue to governments across the world. And I think, you know, tax can feel really far from our grasp. I know it really did when I started working at Fair Tax Foundation, and I was trying to get my head around, okay, you know, how can we really tackle this stuff as individuals, as people in communities? But I want to share 3 ways that you can help tax be more of a force for good in our society. The first one is, obviously, please just continue to advocate for cooperatives and businesses that you have a connection to.
Sorry, Mary,
you
just
the second would... Hi.
Sorry, you were breaking up quite a bit
there. Is that any better?
Yes, that sounds better. So it was just you just go back a little bit, that'll be great.
Do you want me to go back to the asks that we've got?
That'd be brilliant.
Great.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, everybody. So my Wi-Fi is obviously having a Sunday morning off. So the first one was really to just continue to advocate for, you know, cooperative businesses to gain and continue being fair tax mark accredited, so that we can really grow up to a critical mass of businesses. The second one would be to continue, if you mentioned this earlier, our UK Fair Tax Councils network is, you know, please check on our website to see if your local council is already signed up as a Fair Tax Council. Co-op Party has have been behind so much of the success today. You know, that's from pioneering a unique anti-dirty money and fair tax pledge in Westminster, to building fair tax into community wealth building in Sunderland, calling on more suppliers to become fair tax accredited in Edinburgh. But, you know, it's something that's pretty straightforward to get on board with, and we can be there to offer support. We have a sample motion on our website, and obviously a list of the councils that already signed up. And currently, UK procurement rules actually prevent councils from meaningfully rewarding supplier businesses that commit to a fair and transparent approach to tax. So we really need more voices, more councils on board, calling for these rules to change. And thank you to any of you here today that have already been behind that success. And just the third call that I had is, you know, the Co-op Party in the halls of power, Westminster to Holyrood and the Senedd, is, I know you're going to continue pushing for progressive reforms, just as you've done with pressuring Sheenagh to support a global minimum tax on multinationals last year. So I think going forward, Labour's already committed to reforming public procurement rules to reward suppliers that pay their fair share, and we know that you're going to back this all the way. Indeed, already put down an amendment as part of the procurement bill earlier this year. So I'm just continuing to push for procurement reform and fair tax within that. And then again, within national policy, and bear with me because this really isn't a very kind of sexy ask, but it's a really crucial piece of the tax justice jigsaw, is that we have already sitting in UK legislation, but just never enacted, a provision that would force multinational businesses operating here in the UK to publish a breakdown of exactly how much income, profit and tax is being generated. And it's otherwise known as public country by country reporting. And what we see is the vast majority of businesses refusing to disclose this, refusing to disclose how much corporation tax they pay here or in any other country. And it means that we've got no way as citizens or as campaigners of telling whether the likes of Amazon and Facebook are paying their fair share of taxes. Our fair tax businesses voluntarily disclose this information. So we think it's really time for the UK to press the activate button on this legislation. And I know separately to this that the Co-op Party is pushing for other tax-related reform, business rates, action against tax havens, and the introduction of a land value tax. So I think that's all I wanted to say today. And just other than just a cheeky one to say, a fourth ask, you know, please do sign up to our newsletter, to our social media, and help us to get the word out there about fair tax. Thank you, Ruth, and thanks everybody.
Fab. Thank you so much for that, Mary. So Sheenagh, are you here? Are you there? Sheenagh, our next speaker.
Hello, yes,
Oh,
I'm here.
yep. Hi. Fab, thanks. So over to you.
Thank you. Hi everybody, good morning. I'm actually visiting family up in Scotland, so I'm hoping that my Wi-Fi is okay, but please let me know, Ruth, if there's any difficulty. Very pleased to speak with you. It's the first time that I've been invited, so it's a particular pleasure for me. What I'm going to do is talk a bit about credit unions, just to give you a bit more information. I'm not sure how much you know already. Then about what difference we make to a fairer economy and how that's important to the way that we work and what we want. And then how you might be able to help us do more of that. So first of all, credit unions, we're a worldwide movement. There's actually 393 million members of credit unions across the world and assets of $3.4 trillion. The UK is considered a developing nation. Actually, for credit unions, we're learning a lot from Mexico, Kenya, Brazil, America as well, the Philippines. They're guiding lights for us. So we're still emerging, let's say. We've got quite a long way to go in terms of developing credit unions and having them as much more central in the social economy. However, in the UK, we do have 1.5 million members and assets of 2.5 billion. And there's a good spread of credit unions right across the UK, so lots of opportunities to get involved. So just to tell you a little bit about our credit union, I'm from South Manchester Credit Union. I've been involved for about 20 years. We are a community credit union, which means we grew out of fresh air, basically. Nobody came and gave us any capital. We were set up by volunteers who met once a week for 2 years alongside the rest of their lives. And they deposited money themselves. And then we started to lend to each other, and then more people deposited, and it grew from that. And today we've been going for 23 years. We have a staff now of 10, We have a high street presence on Fog Lane, which is an ordinary street in Manchester. We have 4,700 members and assets of 4 million. Basically what we do is we offer a safe place to save for people. We strongly encourage saving, and we offer affordable loans in a fair, transparent way. We are cooperative ourselves, that's our business model. Alongside that role, I'm also chair of the local consortium of credit unions. This is a consortium across Greater Manchester. We've recently expanded and there's 13 credit unions involved, and they're all based in GM. And we're all cooperative, so we cooperate with each other. We think it's quite a unique way in which we're doing it. We collaborate basically to make the most of opportunities across GM to grow our reach, to amplify our voice. It's still only less than 3% of the population in Greater Manchester are members of a credit union, so we've got a big challenge ahead of us. That's why we're banding together and making the most of that. Recently, what have we been up to? We received some backing from Andy Burnham earlier this year. We launched a harmonised product as a response to the cost of living crisis called a £1 loan. And he gave us a lot of support for that. We are about to launch coming up this week, so you could have a look at it. Hopefully we'll make a bit in the news, Co-op news. We're launching a unique fund, which is to use credit union capital. So that means local community wealth that's been built up by deposits from people who live in Greater Manchester. Local community wealth is going to be used to lend to local social enterprises. Greater Manchester is ambitious enough to want to be the social enterprise capital of the UK. So we're really driving a lot of change at the moment. And it's great that credit unions are right in the thick of that. And we believe that's a unique fund and a unique way of working together. So that's about to launch. So what difference do we make, credit unions? That's a little bit about us. What is different about us? I was thinking about it, and one of the ways we do it is we disrupt the market by being in it. We are activists. We're not policy makers. We're doing it at ground level, and we are changing it, transforming it. Probably still in quite an organic, gradual way. We're hoping for some step changes in that because we want to change it faster. We work alongside Fair for All Finance, for example, if you're aware of them. One of their remits is to help create a fairer economy, to get to so that ordinary people have more access to affordable lending, particularly. So yeah, we work alongside with them. At the sort of the structure level, the organisational level, that is the effect that we're looking to have on the local economy. And I think for individuals, the effect can be that for a lot of people come to us, they're saving perhaps for the first time in their lives. So the transformation of having some personal capital makes a big difference just to people's finances, but also their mindset, their confidence, who they think they are, they could be, their life chances. We're slowly improving credit scores. The effect that has on families and local communities, we're really positive about. So what do we need to do more of that and to go deeper and further, which is what we want? First of all, we need the appetite to do that, which we have got. And then we need people to come alongside us. So there's two ways. One, I'd say, is individuals. For anybody here, anybody you know, I strongly encourage you to get involved if you're not already. You can simply join your local credit union. There is a website where you can find your credit union, I think it's called. You can find where it is, you can join and get involved. You could perhaps volunteer. We're always looking for people to join our boards. We have a volunteer board of directors, and there are other ways to get involved. You could advocate for us if you are in a position where you can influence or open up opportunities in procurement, for example. Encourage us to come alongside. We don't have the resource, particularly to market ourselves very well. We don't have that much resource to do the networking that some other organisations have. So if you could come alongside and open those opportunities for us, that would be really good. You could also save with us. We're a great place to save. You probably wouldn't get the same kind of return you might be able to get at other places at the moment. but you would be eligible for a dividend, and you would know that we squeeze all the juice out of any resource that is given to us and use it for all the things that we're talking about. And then the last thing I would say is on policy. We're recently benefiting from the new Financial Services and Markets Act that came through, and is giving us permissions for new types of lending that we haven't had before, which can help communities and can also help us become more sustainable. One option that we're really looking at the moment is green lending. We have a green loan that we offer at South Manchester, and at the consortium level, we're looking into retrofit to see how we can offer that across GM as credit unions. We're working with Carbon Co-op. And just to tell you quickly, we're very inspired by the Irish model. They have a one-stop shop where there's any state support for green lending. So this is for anything from retrofit down to much smaller options like insulation, and to make sure that we're including everybody. That's quite important for us as credit unions. They have a one-stop shop where the state support is clearly laid out. There is clear technical information because some of the decisions require quite a lot of understanding and knowledge about options that people have. And then credit unions are positioned clearly as the finance provider of choice where there are gaps in credit, or where people want to save towards a longer term goal. And we really think there's an opportunity for something like that in the UK. I could talk for a lot more, but I'll stop there.
Well, thank you so much, Sheenagh. So now we have the last speaker in this panel, Denisha.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Just to say, it's my first time speaking here as well. So it's such a pleasure to be invited along and to share some of our work that we're doing at Positive Money, and also the other panel members. Just really great talks just now, and I've learned a lot, and they're very important areas of work to sort of create a fair economy, which is what we're all interested in. And I think right now, especially now with the very deep cost of living crisis we're experiencing, this is so important ahead of the next election. So it really is a pleasure to speak to people who are working on the ground on actively trying to change our economy. So thank you. So a little bit about Positive Money, if people don't know about us. We're a very young organisation, I guess. We started after the financial crisis in 2008, spurred on by the unfairness of that crisis and how it hit ordinary people so hard, but it was the banks that were creating this problem. And so we're a research, campaigning and lobbying organisation that tries to basically reform and reimagine the banking and money system so that it works for a fairer economy, more sustainable economy, and a more democratic one. So that's our main goal. And financial inclusion and access to cash is one of our key priorities. And this sort of access to cash comes under one of our reports, which was the future of cash in a digital age, because that landscape is changing so drastically at the moment. And just as a caveat, the term financial inclusion, I think is, sorry, my visual changed. The term sort of financial inclusion, as a caveat, I think it's worth exploring as well, because from the commercial mainstream perspective, financial inclusion for banks, it often means try and get us to take more debt out, to extend credit to us potentially, and to get their sort of claws into us, I guess. But for us, it's about economic justice, and that's why access to cash is really important, because there are still lots of people that are underserved and underbanked in today's economy, and access to making payments is a fundamental part of our ability to participate in the economy and to live our daily lives. And it has to be kind of relevant and adapted to people of different sort of ages and different backgrounds and different capacities and abilities. So we really want to protect that. And our view is that access to cash it should be like a universal need, like a utility, like water, electricity. And it gives people of different backgrounds options for how they want to live their lives. So cash really plays a critical role today. since the last 10 years, cash has really declined, obviously. I think most of us will have experienced that firsthand, and card payments have become the dominant form of making payments, around 60% in 2022, the latest figures. But cash is still very important. Cash makes up 15% of regular payments in the economy now, which doesn't sound like a lot, but lots of people still rely on it. Something like 5 million adults rely on cash. I think this isn't just for individuals making payments, but small businesses as well. And a lot of people aren't served by the current banking system. They're financially excluded from it. Or there are lots of hidden costs if you're not a sort of well-paid person. If you, for example, have to rely on various forms of benefits, or you're from a very low-income working family. So it's really important that we protect the right to cash. And very interestingly, in recent data showed that the use of cash has increased 7% for the first time in 10 years. And that's since the cost of living crisis has really begun to deepen. And part of the reason is it allows people
doing cash in hand.
Yes, and cash in hand, but it also allows people who are financially in trouble or hardship excluded. It allows us to budget. And I think we've all probably been there at some point in our life where we really need to know where every penny is going. So the people that are really most affected by this, it could be us, and it could be people we know, but rural communities, people who are isolated, very young people, people on low incomes. And we still have something like 1.3 million people that don't have access to, sorry, I'm seeing the links in the chat that come up, people who don't have access to the banking sector, who can't access these complicated products that have lots of hidden costs. So I think just sort of letting people know about what we call kind of the war on cash, if you like. A bit of background to that is we're told very much that we're moving to a digital age and that everything needs to go online, and it's basically us that want to do that. You know, it's the public that are pushing for that kind of system of everything being contactless. But what we're not told about is the way in which the banking system is a bit like sort of monopolized by certain card payment providers and big dominant banks. And those are the people, or the groups of people, that want us to not use cash. It's not very profitable for them. The infrastructure for cash isn't profitable for them. So we're seeing lots of bank closures all around us. This is very commonplace now. And ATMs being closed down, something like 300 ATMs, free to use ATMs being closed down. Oh, I've forgotten the figure, like 300 every month, so that's 10 a day. So really what we're looking at is how do we protect this access to cash? And our main calls are, one, to ask the government to give the payment systems regulator an explicit goal and function to protect cash. Currently they don't have that, and to prevent, and the powers to prevent bank closures, because people need to physically be able to access their cash. It's not, it's you know, important that they've got ATMs and bank branches nearby to them. We're also doing new work on digital cash. Now, this tends to be a little bit more controversial and a bit less understood. It's sort of seems confusing, but there's a lot of new work going on around central bank digital currencies, and we're trying to influence that. And it's really valuable debate to be had. So if any of you aren't aware of it, please do look up our stuff on digital pound or central bank digital currencies. And we're asking for the Bank of England to basically give every individual a bank account. This bypasses the big dominant banks, and it allows a digital form of cash to be functioning almost equivalently to cash. So we have that option in society. What we're worried about is that private sector financial tech companies and banks will sort of dominate that sector and have lots of hidden costs. So we want to get a digital form of cash in place that functions as fairly as cash currently does, and allows us to make payments without all hidden costs, or without private companies making lots of profit out of our payments. And yeah, so we have a lot of material online. If you check us out, or if you get in touch with us, we can provide that material on central bank digital currencies. And we're trying to influence that. Currently, the central bank, the Bank of England, is having a consultation on it. And one of our key concerns really is that Rishi Sunak at the Treasury is very keen on the sort of financial tech companies. You know, he has a lot of links with Silicon Valley, and he's very keen on them kind of dominating that space. And we don't want to see that. We want to see a public form of money that performs the same role as cash for people. So we think early on as possible, if we can kind of influence that conversation and decide what that looks like in a democratic way, that would be what's best for all of us. So I'm going to stop there because I feel like I'm rambling now. But please do get in touch with us as well if you want to get involved in these debates. We'd be really pleased to hear from you. And just very quickly on the issue of tax, we recently put out a demand for a windfall tax on banks, given that they've benefited so much from the recent interest rate rises. So that sort of crosses over with fair tax. And also we have talked about the importance of credit unions to support the financially excluded as well. So I felt it really a great panel that we all crossed over on each other there.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Denisha. So we will open up to questions now, and we have some time. So I've got Mary Fee. Your hand is up, so you should get asked to unmute.
Yes, I remember when Positive Money started, I thought that the central bank, I'm not sure what they called it then, but the idea of a currency issued from the centre that didn't have to be created as debt by banks was the central policy of Positive Money. And by the way, it's nobody seemed to notice when the service being provided by the post offices, where everyone had a bank account, disappeared along the way somewhere. What was that called? Yeah, the Gyro Bank. Anyway, what I've noticed recently, and I'm in touch with quite a few people who are sensible campaigners against, financial corruption, etc., have become infected by conspiracy theories. And one of the conspiracies is that the CBDC is a conspiracy to track us all. So have you got any comment about that?
Do you want to should I take it now, or is it?
You can answer now if you don't.
Yeah, very simply, Mary. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, Positive Money has expanded in a way that to recognise that we need a very kind of diverse ecosystem for the banking system to work fairly for all people. So that's one of the reasons that we focus on very multiple issues now. But in terms of the conspiracy theories, yeah, I mean, it's a very simple answer to that. The government can already do it. They already have the powers to track you. We have them through basically criminal and terrorist laws. If they were going to do it, they'd be doing it, I guess. I think what our role is to play here is to say that let's be part of this conversation to decide what it will look like, because if we don't, the private sector will dominate it, and we'll have more and more financial crisis that we'll face. The same sort of financial crisis will occur again and again, and we'll have to foot the bill for it. So the idea is let's be part of that conversation, and the powers to track us already exist, really. I think being part of the conversation means we can decide where those boundaries are. And again, I'd just like to sort of simplify it in terms of what a CBDC is for us. It is there to play the role that cash plays, but we can't fend off forever the sort of digitalization of everything. So we need an alternative that performs the same role as cash alongside protecting our access to cash. So that would be the very simple kind of argument there.
Thank you. So I've got two more hands raised, so we'll take them, and then we'll probably have to have to sadly finish the session just because of the time. So if I take both the questions together, and then we'll go round with the 3 speakers to respond. So I've got Pervez Qureshi, and followed by Joyce Nichol. So you'll be asked to unmute.
Yes, good morning, everyone. It's very interesting. My question is to Sheenagh. I think it's a very useful tool, microcredit, throughout the world, especially in third world countries where I'm originally from. Is there any limit of deposit by an individual member to a credit union, and what are the safeguarding mechanism for depositors? For example, I mean, if anyone keep money in a bank, there is a limit that it can be safeguarded. Is there a limit for credit union as well? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. And I agree, microcredit is really important across the world. It's amazing what difference it can make for people. And that's why we want to offer it safely. So there is a limit for us. We are cooperatives. So any one deposit, the maximum it can be is 1.5% of total deposits, so that one person doesn't have more influence or control, if you like, over the whole cooperative. So at any point in time that would change. So for us at the moment, that's approximately £60,000. But obviously it keeps changing depending on what level the deposits are at. But it's 1.5% of deposits. All deposits are covered by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. So that's up to a value of 85,000. So that means that because our maximum is below that, it would be covered by the scheme. So in that sense, it's, if that's what you mean by safeguarding, it is safe. If something happens to the credit union, the person's deposits would be safe. Just to mention, we also offer a free insurance at our credit union. A lot of credit unions offer it as well, which is a kind of life insurance. So if people die prematurely, their savings are doubled, which, particularly people who don't have a lot of savings, can make quite a big difference.
Thank you for that. So the last question to Joyce Nichol.
Thank you. I've put a few things in the chat section, but sort of 3 items I'd like to raise is, one, how do we ensure that there is more funding available to micro SMEs? They're actually the bulk employers in the country. Secondly, Denisha, should we be having a look at setting a pilot in Britain to outlaw gambling on currencies? And to Sheenagh, could we consider something whereby a person's social economic contribution to their community, now that might be, for example, voluntary work, okay, or child carers within families, that they actually get a credit at the credit unions, which can be exchanged for funding, so that people who are in poor, cash poor households are able to engage, and in particular that the youth have a sense of belonging and engagement, because just now they're effectively told you're worthless unless you have cash, and we need to change that mindset. And my final point is just, do we need to fundamentally address the universal credit, which has separated the separation between housing benefit and other funding required to feed and pay your bills with? Because just now, if you're given £100 and at the beginning your rent is £50, as the rent goes up, you have less money for meeting your other obligations. And we're going to stop recording how much money is actually going out to the rent. So do we need to address that? And I've got many other points, but they're for another day.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. So if 3 speakers want to kind of touch on those questions that have been posed, and anything else that you kind of would like to kind of say as we come to bring this session to an end, would be great. So I don't know who wants to go first.
I could possibly go very quickly, actually, on the question of a pilot to, I guess this was a reference to cryptocurrencies and how they perform the function of almost like an asset that people gamble on. I think it's very hard to know how to address that issue, but one thing is we need a lot of regulation on it now. We really need the government to start regulating that sector and to be aware of its impact on the wider economy. So how could it impact the wider economy when, you know, these cryptos go up and down so drastically? But also literacy. I think a lot of young people are, you know, getting involved in cryptocurrencies, and there's not much educational literacy around what they really are. So I think there's an element of education and campaigning around them as well that's really important. And again, I would say provide that alternative of a central bank digital currency that doesn't have those features that lend itself towards automatically kind of working like an asset that people want to make lots of money off and profit from, and then they crash. So having that alternative that is safe and performs the functions of cash, I think would also help.
I was thinking also of sterling, not to gamble with sterling and national currencies.
I see. Yes, I mean, really I guess that's a lot to do with, that's a difficult one, because the financial sector has performed those functions for quite a while, and we give a lot of, it's not regulated basically. And I think that's the thing, it needs to be regulated, that side of thing, working with currencies. It's a big industry in itself, and it's also international. So what we can do individually as the UK would probably be to have our regulators have very much more oversight on that as well. But it's a really good point.
Sheenagh, Mary?
Yes, yes, I'm happy to come in there. So many thoughtful comments there. There's a lot we could have a long conversation, I'm sure. Just to respond quickly, particularly on the younger demographic, we've actually brought it into our strategy about 5 years ago to aim to grow, particularly in the 18 to 30s demographic. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is for the credit union itself to be sustainable and to be relevant for a longer period of time. And the key driver, though, was that we realised there are a lot of gaps in financial confidence, financial education in that age group. If people have not had contact, either through family or people around them, with familiarity and confidence with financial products and language, then when they come to make their first independent steps, it's pretty daunting. And if we can get them linked up with a credit union first off, that makes a big difference. We do what we call coaching, which is more on a bespoke level, and really that's to speak to your point about how people are valued. What is the point of having assets and cash, and how do we actually value contributions people make? I think that's a little bit what you were saying about people who are in caring positions. Could they build up some other way of having credits with a credit union? I think that's a really interesting idea. I'd like to hear more of that in some other ways. We do try and promote that through the coaching and through what we do is we work with people to focus on their own dreams and goals, which are regardless of income level. So yes, money is important, taking care of money is important, and humans with their own ambition, regardless of income level, is really important. We see how powerful that is, how people can work the resource that they have, whatever that is. If it is money, time, skills, they can work that towards a greater sense of well-being, which is really important. We get a lot of feedback on that from members. The more that we do that, the more we learn about it, the more members appreciate it. And then just quickly, one of your other comments was about micro SMEs. I think I agree with you. It's really, really important to get capital into that, but also mentoring and some know-how, some encouragement. Greater Manchester is a place where there are a lot of small SMEs, some of them social enterprises, some of them businesses. We do lend to individuals already. I have quite a lot of examples of that, people starting their own business maybe as a side hustle, some of them social enterprises. And then through the scheme I was talking about with the consortium, one of the spin-offs of that is that we are upskilling ourselves at credit unions in terms of our assessment ability for how we would make investments, understanding businesses better, and how we would link up with the ongoing mentoring. That seems to be really important. So it's not just having the money at the right time at the start, but it's when would you next need some investment and how have you spent it and applied the resource that you have. So I think, yeah, thank you for your thoughtful comments.
Thank you, Sheenagh. Mary, do you have any final comments you'd like to make to bring us to the end?
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, I don't think any of the questions were addressed directly to the subject of fair tax. So I just wanted to, if I can, just close with a couple of bits of good news from the co-op sector and say that a couple of our, just this year, we've had 3 new businesses from the co-op and wider sector come on board with the fair tax mark. One is called Share Energy Co-operative, and they work with community projects and co-op energy to develop to develop locally based energy. And sorry that I'm still a voice from the dark, by the way, but my my connection still seems to be a bit shaky. Had employee-owned firm Make Architects join up, and then we also had our very first Dutch multinational business join up, which is the cooperative Agrofair, who are a distributor, leading distributor of globally of fair trade and organic bananas. So I think, you know, we are now able to accredit businesses that are based outside of the UK, and, you know, we really hope that the co-op sector in Europe and beyond will look to the leading role that the UK co-op sector has played and start to champion fair tax overseas as well. Thanks, Ruth, and thanks very much, everybody, again.
Fab, thank you so much to our 3 speakers there, to Mary, Sheenagh and Denisha, who's had to unfortunately leave us. Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you so much for all the contributions. As I say, we've all the contributions that have been made in the chat, we are keeping them and collating them, and anything that we've not got to, we will get back to you. And as I say, you can always email us at mal@party.coop as well. So yeah, great morning session so far, and I now get to hand the chairship of this over to Councillor Abigail Marshall-Catung, who's chair of the Co-op Party's Policy Subcommittee, and she's going to take us through the next discussions that we've got going on. Abigail.
Thank you very much, Ruth, our able Vice Chair. Truly appreciate it. I've thoroughly enjoyed your session as well, and thank you to all the speakers.